Have you come to the realization that you have been choosing emotionally unavailable people? Well, if you have come to that realization, or you're just interested in knowing how to not, that is what this video is all about. Hola, hola, hola a todos. Es tu prima favorita, Bobby here, and welcome back to the Cousins Corner. If you're not new here, welcome to the Cousins Corner. If you are new here, I am tu prima favorita, Bobby, and I just like to talk, and I am going to continue the topic of the last video. If you didn't watch the last video, go back and watch it. In that video, I talk about why some of us may tend to choose, chase, or attract emotionally unavailable people. And this video is about how to break that cycle. So I would suggest that you go watch that one first, and then you come back to this one, okay? You still here. Todavía estás aquí. I can see you. Go back and watch the other video. Please. Anyways, now that you're back after you have watched the last video, let's go ahead and hop into how you can break that cycle of choosing, chasing, and attracting emotionally unavailable personas. All right. Number one is reflecting on your past patterns and the past partners that you have chosen or been more attracted to or been more drawn to. You can do this by reflecting on your past relationships, seeing what those different patterns are, seeing how these people or certain, even if they're flings and not necessarily relationships, but how they have matched up to each other, how you can kind of spot the pattern within those people that you have been choosing. Are you constantly drawn to partners who avoid commitment or who show up inconsistent or who are emotionally unavailable? Are you constantly drawn to people who kind of lead with that in the forefront and then they pull back? Are you drawn to people who love bomb you, etc., etc., etc.? The biggest thing here for this part is just making sure that you take time to kind of reflect on those ongoing patterns. How are you feeling when you choose these emotionally unavailable people? How do you see that they make you feel? One thing that really helps me out is there's a podcast. There's a podcast. Louise Rumbaugh, I really enjoyed listening to all of her episodes during this process, and I listened to them on Spotify. But there was one, I can't remember exactly what it was titled, but it was about choosing emotionally unavailable partners. And she and the therapist guest that she had on for the episode were talking about basically sitting down and just going through the list of people, the list of past relationships or past flings or whatever the case may be, and kind of noting what those patterns are. So I legit sat and I looked at what I call my big four. Like, I have not had a lot of official relationships in my adulthood, but there have been four huge connections that I've had that have played a really big part, that I was able to learn a lot from, and that really shook me to my core, and that all pretty much lined up in the same way. In a sense, all four of these men were, I don't want to say the same person because they had different attributes. There were different things about them that I was drawn to. But one of the underlying things for all of them is that they were all equally either emotionally unavailable or emotionally immature and just not able to really meet the emotional needs that I had at those times. And I really sat, and not to say that I just sat and wrote out a bunch of bad things about these people, right? I also wrote about how I showed up in those relationships. I wrote about the boundaries that I did or did not set, or the boundaries that I allowed to be overstepped. I wrote about the things that I allowed to be overlooked. I wrote about the way that I felt in certain situations and why I was desiring a person who was telling me no, or who was not giving me, what they either said that they would or what they, alluded to that they could, but they didn't, or whatever the case may be. But I sat and I reflected on my big four, is what I call them. And again, these weren't all official relationships. Some of them were like short-lived flings that really didn't go anywhere. But it's like, I was like, why was I so attached in that short season of us just barely even getting to know each other, and just really sitting and looking at the pattern and seeing how does that relate to how I was brought up? How does that relate to the way I was shown love, or the way that I was taught to view love, or the beliefs that I developed about love or relationships or whatever the case may be? And I sat with that to kind of see where I had been and where I was headed and where I wanted to go as far as not choosing these types of mofos anymore. So I say that to say that step one is reflecting on those patterns, seeing how you showed up, seeing how you felt in those relationships, seeing how those people made you feel, how those people showed up, and if you see a pattern within those people, so that you can start seeing, okay, when a person shows up like this in my life, that is something that I need to look to as a flag, whether it's a red flag or an orange flag or just something to be aware of, because this could potentially mean that I'm headed for the same thing on that cycle again. And if that's not where you want to be, this is the first step to breaking that down. So with that, that also helps you to, the main point of that is developing that self-awareness of who are these people that I'm choosing? Why do I keep choosing them? How are they making me feel? What am I chasing by entertaining these people or attracting these people or chasing these people? Like building up that self-awareness to know what part am I playing in this, taking that accountability for, okay, I'm choosing these people and I'm ignoring these certain things or these certain patterns that I'm seeing. And now moving forward, when I do see signs of these patterns or when I do see signs of these behaviors, I can say, oh no, no lo quiero, and I can turn the other way and go put my energy elsewhere. The second way that you can break this cycle is improving in your self-esteem. So this could look like practicing self-love, setting boundaries, and surrounding yourself with supportive people. So self-love, radical form of self-love, but also self-love in the sense of, you know, the light form of self-love. So taking care of yourself, of course, pampering yourself, all of that, it can be a form of self-love. But when we say the radical act of self-love, self-love is not always easy. It's not always pretty or cutesy or whatever. Practicing self-love is also being able to hold yourself accountable. It's also being able to look at yourself and say, hey, you're doing it again. Hey, this person is showing up in a way that them other people just showed up, and is that what you want to go on again? You know, it's also a form of giving yourself the things that you need or the things that you're looking for in other people. Sometimes, to be completely honest, we don't always like these people, right? It's just that there's something in them, whether it's that familiarity or whether it's because we feel like something is lacking within ourselves, whether it's just because I just have the desire to be loved, but finding out where does that stem from and what is it that I can give myself to feel that need so that I don't just put up with that from just anybody, especially from a person who's not willing to show up in the way that I actually need for them to show up. This also includes, as I mentioned, setting boundaries, and not just setting boundaries, but sticking to those boundaries. If consistency, someone being able to show up consistently is something that's important to you, make that a boundary. You can let people know early on. You don't have to be super demanding with it, but you do need to be assertive with your boundaries, and you do need to hold strong to them. So if I know that that's something that is a factor for me, I'm gonna say, hey, I like what we're doing. I like that we're, you know, kicking it or whatever. I don't want to rush anything, force anything, or put pressure or anything, but consistency is important to me. And if we're going to keep kicking it like this, then you at least got to be consistent on some front, you know, and making that known and setting that, because that is a boundary. And if you overstep that, I'm not going to say it again. I'm not going to bring it up again. And I've been there where I've tried to get people to understand my boundary or my reason for having that boundary. And if you and that person are just not on the same page, it's totally fine. That just means that y'all are not compatible, and go somewhere else. Go somewhere else. It's totally fine. But not only just a boundary with consistency, but whatever your boundary is, whether your boundary is something that has to do with physical, whether your boundary is something that has to do with intimacy, whether your boundary has to do with communication, like I value communication, I value being consistent with communication, I value knowing that you have an interest in me, I value being able to have certain conversations, I value vulnerability, I value building a friendship, whatever it is, set those values as your boundaries and stand to them. And if someone oversteps them or they teeter-totter on them, like, let it be, I'll say no more than 2 times. Like, I'm not going to repeat myself more than twice. And the reason why I say that is because once I'm letting you know, like the first time, whether I'm letting you know right up front, this is the first time I'm telling you, or whether it's, oh, I didn't tell you, so let me tell you now. You only have one other time for me to mention it again, and after that I'm not saying anything. And that also is dependent on the person, because I've had people where I've given them more chances than maybe I should have, and I've also had most people where I'm like, I already said it and I'm not gonna say it again, or I've said it once, I'm gonna say it right now, and then after that I just walk away. I'm usually a person who's just like, there won't be a third time, there will barely be a second time, but if I like you, you know, what can I say? I'm just a girl. But no, I say that to say to you and to me, setting those boundaries is important. State what it is that you need, stick to it, and if someone can't meet that, or they try to overstep that, or they try to make you go wayward with your boundaries, then it's time for you to go away from them. And then thirdly, as I mentioned in this same point, is being around supportive people. So I'm not saying like put yourself around a bunch of yes men or a bunch of friends that are like, yes girl, whatever you say is correct, whatever the case may be. But align yourself with people who align with what you believe in. If you know that you are not a casual Kathy or whatever, like don't expect your friends that are to be supportive of you saying like, no, I want something serious, I want something that's consistent, and I want something communicative. Some of them might be able to understand you on that front, but if they're not about that, then it's gonna be hard for you to find support within that. So it's like, make sure that you're stating what your boundaries are to people who also either hold those boundaries or who can hold space for you to cheer you on with that, and to hold you accountable. Like, girl, you said that you weren't going to get into another fling, you said that you were ready for something serious. Like, get around friends who will show up for you and be like, girl, this is what you said. Now, you didn't cry to me about this 18 times, and here's the 19th time, and you still crying about this same dude, the same person that's overstepping this boundary, or this different person that's overstepping the same boundary, or whatever the case may be. So get around people who can be supportive of what your needs are, and who can validate you for having those needs. And you don't want to be around people who are like, girl, that doesn't make any sense, no one's doing that in this day and age, that's not how dating goes. You know, you don't want to be around people who are just shutting you down if you know that this is something that's important to you, or this is something that you need. You want to make sure that you're around people who have an understanding of you, have an understanding of your boundaries, have an understanding of what it is that you see for yourself, and who can vouch for you and hold you accountable as well. That also includes the people that you choose to entertain. If you are going into a certain friendship or situation, I don't want to say shit, we're not doing situationships in 2024, so forget that I said that, scratch that, bórralo, quítalo, just forget that, right? But into a friendship, a connection, a relationship, or whatever the case may be, putting yourself around people who are supportive in that is also aligning yourself with people who understand those boundaries, right? If you are on a date with somebody and you set something as a boundary, make sure that they have an understanding that that's a boundary. If that person brushes it off, takes it lightly, plays or laughs it off, pushes it under the rug, or pushes that boundary, that is not a person that you need to see again. That is not a person that you need to go out with again. If I sat here and I stated this to you and you turned around and you threw it back in my face, or you played in my face right here, right after I told you, there will not be another date. There will not be another conversation. And I know I said that I'll tell somebody something and I'll give them a chance, you know, to F up or whatever. And I'll be like, hey, I told you that that was a boundary. And either that's the end of it, or I give them another chance. I'm not saying when they do that stuff right away in your face. I'm saying maybe you said it when y'all first met. It's like 3, 4, 6.5 months down the line. They kind of scratch the surface of a boundary, and you got to remind them or reset that, hey, that this is a boundary for me. Okay, whatever. But if you are sitting there having a conversation with somebody and I say, joking about kids in an inappropriate way, and this has happened before, is a boundary for me, because yeah, F them kids, whatever the case may be, you know, it's funny, ha ha ha, but there are certain lines of things that I don't find funny when it comes to talking about kids. And that person oversteps that boundary and they make another joke, or they're like, you're being a lame, or whatever the case may be. Cool. I already told you that that's something that I'm not comfortable with. I already told you that that's something that I don't find funny. And you sat here within the same conversation, brushed it off, and made another joke. And it can be about whatever it is that your boundaries are, whatever it is that you state to that person. I'm done. No, you just sat here in my face and told me I don't care about your boundaries. And I will say that is more important for you to not let slide ever. Because once you start doing that, you start being wayward on that. When someone can do it right there in your face and you forgiving them on the spot, or you let it go on the spot, that gives them more leeway to be like, oh, what else are they gonna let me play with? What else are they gonna let me overstep their boundaries on, right? I had a similar situation some years ago with this guy. We weren't like dating or anything like that, but he liked me. He asked me out or whatever. Another video for another time. If you're not attracted to them, just don't do it. Just don't do it. But I had told him that I was not comfortable with someone being like in my physical space if I haven't gotten to know them yet. So I'm like, it's cool, like when we see each other we can hug, like to greet, that's totally fine, but your hands do not need to be on my person. Like, I'm still getting to know you. I don't really know you like that. We're just kicking it. It's cool. Told him that, right? That's a huge boundary for me. He crossed that boundary, and it wasn't anything like crazy per se, but basically like he touched me in a way that I didn't feel comfortable with, and I pretty much like went off on him. Like, I pretty much went off, and it wasn't like where I was just like went like crazy. But I got really serious. My voice did get a little bit louder or whatever, because I wasn't playing. Because I just told you that was a boundary for me. I just told you. And you turned around and you did that. This man proceeded to laugh in my face, tell me how cute he thought it was, and then made an excuse for himself that, oh, I'm an aggravant. So, if you tell me something or you don't like something, like, I'm gonna push at it. Oh, that was it. That man never heard from me again after that night. Like, that was totally it. I was like, oh yeah, I got back down real, like, not that I was like super escalated, but like I said, I did get a little loud with him, because I'm like, I told you that was a boundary for me. Like, I came back down. I was like, all right, cool. Never said nothing else to that man. Because it's like, I understand, like, if you're like, oh, I'm just playful, like, whatever, you don't play with my boundaries. You don't play with my boundaries. That's all. So when I say putting yourself around people who are supportive of your boundaries, that also means setting yourself up with people who are understanding of that. So these people that you are choosing to date, or people that you are choosing to entertain, if they are overstepping, especially right after you've told them, that's not somebody that you need to be entertaining. Another way that you can break the cycle from choosing or attracting or chasing emotionally unavailable people is healing from your past wounds. You have to be willing to explore your past traumas and those certain wounds that you might have from trauma that are pushing you to want to be with these people who are emotionally unavailable. I kind of talked about that in the last video, that there are certain things that draw you to these people, and if you don't know what they are, if you don't know where they're stemming from, it's gonna be harder for you to choose differently, right? Because you really need to get to the nitty-gritty of, why does this feel good when it feels so bad? Why is this something that I continue to go after when I know how much it hurts me and how upsetting it makes me feel at the end of the day? Why am I finding some certain comfort in this, or familiarity in this, or in this type of person? And that could be done through therapy, that could be done through self-reflection, or both. That could be done through talking to people who know you the best, if y'all have that type of relationship where y'all can really talk about those things and be flat out and open and honest. This can be exploring your relationship to your parents or to your caregivers, And again, just reflecting on those past relationships that you have had. You want to be able to dig into your traumas, and I can tell you that self-reflection is great. Self-reflection works wonders, but sometimes it is not enough. Sometimes you need to do more than that. So if you are in a position where you can dig deeper with a therapist, these people are paid to help you explore these things. Sometimes it's worth going that route to explore these things, because we can only do so much on our own. And I shared my own story in the last video as well, that when I was exploring my attachment styles and abandonment wounds and all that kind of stuff, it was so exciting for me at first, and then at some point it got super heavy. And it got so heavy that it really took a toll on me. One, because I nose dove right into it, and I oversaturated myself with just the books and the readings and the listenings, the podcasts, the research and all of that. And then it got to a point where it was triggering. And I was like, well, I need someone who is paid, who is not only paid, but trained to help me to navigate these things, to navigate these triggers, to navigate these wounds, to navigate what it means to have certain attachment styles, to navigate what it means to heal, to navigate how to deep dive into those things that my mind has either blocked out or tried to protect me from, right? And it got to a point where I needed that. And so if you can do the self-reflection on your own and that's enough to heal you, great. Do that regardless. But then also, if you are realizing that you're hitting a place where it's like, I need a little bit more help, a little bit more support, I need to go to somebody who is trained to deal with these things, do not take that for granted if you are in a position where you can get that type of help, because it's only going to make you a better, well-rounded person overall. And then especially if you are trying to break this cycle of choosing emotionally unavailable people, or you're trying to break the cycle of being emotionally unavailable yourself, it's only going to help you to come out of that for the better. Whether you're doing it because you want to love better, or because you want to find another partner, or just because you want to move through life being a more well-rounded, more self-actualized, and more open and just ready for the joys of life type of person. The last key I would give into breaking this cycle is for you yourself to embrace emotional availability. If you are a person who indeed is also emotionally unavailable, or you struggle with that vulnerability or emotional availability, this is where you start to change things, right? You yourself must also work on being or becoming emotionally available. The way that you attract the people that you want, the person that you want, the experiences that you want, is you give out certain vibrations to that, right? And not to get all woo-woo manifesto on you, but it's really true. Though, if you want someone who shows up emotionally available, if you want someone who shows up emotionally mature, if you want someone who doesn't shy away from commitment or vulnerability or emotional connection, you yourself have to show up in that way. A lot of times people are just a mirror of us. And that is one of the reasons why sometimes we can find ourselves in spaces where it's like, well, dang, like I feel like this person is so closed off. And then you kind of have to reflect and be like, well, am I showing up closed off as well? And I only say that as a person who has done that as of recent. I shared a bit of my story in the last video where I talked about how I noticed even with some of my friends, like I'm emotionally closed off, and I've worked really, really hard to open up to them, even over the grieving process. Another video that I have that you should go watch, where I've learned to be more vulnerable and hold space for myself so that I can hold space for others, so that they can feel good opening up to me and also holding space for me as well. You have to embrace that emotional availability. You have to become emotionally available yourself. And where that starts is, one, recognizing that maybe I haven't been. Maybe I thought that I was, but I haven't been. And I also think, two, it's understanding what it means to be, one, emotionally available, but also understanding what vulnerability means. I think a lot of times we get this view of vulnerability that it means that we have to put all of our cards out there on the table, and we have to trauma bond with people, and we have to share the deepest, darkest, dirtiest, ugliest, scariest things about ourselves. And sometimes, yeah, that's how you build relationships with people once you get to that level. But being vulnerable just means that you're open to allowing people to see you for who you are. You're allowing people to know how you feel in regards to certain things. You're allowing people to understand more of you, not just, oh yeah, I did that too, but also, yeah, I did that and this is how I felt. I did that and this is what I learned. I did that and this is what that experience was like for me. And it sounds like it's something so small and so minuscule, but when you really sit and you think about it, like, you would be surprised to how many times you may have had the opportunity to be a little bit more open, a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more detailed with people, and because you did it, they didn't feel comfortable. And it's not saying that it's on you just to hold the space, it's on both people. But sometimes you are the one that's setting the tone. Again, sometimes you are the one that the other person is mirroring. And so when I found myself being like, dang, I wish this person would open up more, I really had to sit and think about, well, am I being open with them? Like, I'm asking something of this person that I'm not even offering. I'm not even giving them a chance to do it because I'm showing up as like this, but I'm asking them to show up like this, right? And it's gonna take me also being like, hey, I'm asking you to show up like this, but I too am showing up like this with open arms, allowing myself to be seen, because I want you to feel like this is a space where you're allowed to be seen as well. So just remember that we attract people who reflect our own emotional state. And if you are wanting something deeper, if you are wanting to attract more emotionally open or emotionally available people, partners, friends, whoever, then you have to also put yourself out to be like that. You cannot ask someone to show up in a way that you're not willing to show up. It does not seem fair, and most people are not going to open up to you if they don't feel like it's a space that they can. Some people will, because some people are just an open book. Like, I know that there are some spaces where I just feel like I'm an open book. If you ask my sisters, out of the four of us, they will tell you like, I'm just open. And it's like, I'm actually not, because to them, I'm a bit more open compared to the, out of the four of us. But it's because I have worked on myself to be able to understand how to hold space for people. But I do still know when to pull back, when and what to not share. And then sometimes I really struggle to share or to be open. They don't get to see me more when I'm like navigating romance, right? So they don't get to see how closed off I actually am when it comes to romantic relationships. Like, and that's something that I'm working on, because I'm like, I desire someone who is emotionally vulnerable, who is emotionally open, and I have not been showing up like that. So I've been attracting people who don't show up like that. I've been showing up as closed off. You have to pry into me. You have to work hard to get into me, because I grew up seeing that, oh, in order to get love, I have to pry and I have to work hard. So I'm showing up with that thought in my head, like, I'm gonna have to pry and work hard to get into you, but I'm also reflecting that. So we're just reflecting back and forth that we just gotta work hard to open up. And some people don't have that view, and they're just like, no, I'm not gonna do all of that, because why do all of that when it's just super easy, when you can just be open? And for some of us, it's just not that easy until we work on ourselves and realize, oh shoot, I don't have to give you the whole playbook to my entire life. I can just be a bit more open with myself, so that you feel like you can see me and get to know me. So those are just some things that I wanted to mention about how you can break this cycle. Some steps that I too am taking to break this cycle. And again, not necessarily just for because I want love or whatever, but because I've realized that that is a way that I show up. So that's what I attract. And also that is a way that I have been showing up in certain friendships, although I was desiring stronger relationships with friends also. And I'm like, you're not showing up emotionally available, Bobby, or emotionally open, so you can't expect this out of these friendships if that's not how you're willing to be as well. So thankfully I have some friends that we're learning together. We're going through this process together. And I also have had friends that are like, nah, I'm gonna teach you how to be open, or not necessarily teach you, but I'm gonna show up open so that you can feel open and I can hold space for you. So yeah, all in all, I will say that on top of everything, just remember that this is a process and this is a journey. It's not going to be something that you do overnight. You're not going to wake up one day and be like, I want to be emotionally available, and then you're just going to turn emotionally available. Like, I don't know where the accent came from, y'all. If you know me, I do random accents. Usualmente es en español, but you know, the girl is talented. I was an actress in my past life. Anyway, back to the point. But you're not gonna wake up and just decide that one day and then all of a sudden you're gonna move through the rest of your life like that. No, it is a learning process. It's an unlearning process as well. Unlearning all the things that have kept you in this bubble of, this is what I need to do to protect myself, and so I attract people who feel the same way. I need to show up hard, solid as a rock, protected by all of these walls, but I'm also attracting people who are stonewalled as well and not willing to let me in. And if I want to change that, I'm going to have to take the time and the patience with myself to break those things down, to process these things so that I can show up differently, so that I can attract more of what it is that I actually truly desire. So taking these small steps on this journey of healing, overall, it's just gonna make you a better, well-rounded person. You're gonna show up better in your friendships, you're gonna show up better in your relationships, and you're gonna attract people in those friendships and relationships that show up the same way that you are, because you are willing to put yourself out there, because you are willing to be emotionally open or emotionally available or vulnerable. You're gonna attract those people who are also like, this is a safe space for me and I can also show up that way, and we can hold space for each other. So again, remember, it's a process. It's not gonna happen overnight. Be patient with yourself. There are still gonna be times where you find yourself like, dang, I that was a missed opportunity. Like, I could have been more open in that conversation, or I could have shared more, or sometimes you might find yourself, I could have shared less. You know, it's a process. It is treading new waters and stepping on new grounds. But all in all, the first thing is just realization and a desire for change. That is what's going to set you up for this path and for this journey. And as long as you stay the course, you continue to be patient with yourself, you continue to demonstrate grace with yourself, but also accountability, like, you will do well. You will get there. There's never like just a straight up stopping point, because you're always going to learn more. But this is what's going to put you on the right path. Again, whether it's love, friendship, or just a deeper understanding of yourself and a better journey of self-realization as well. But if I missed anything, or if you'd like to add anything, please feel free to drop down in the comments and share your thoughts, share your opinions, share your input, your insights, your advice. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is Stupida Favorita Bobby here. Thank you for joining me in the Cousins Corner, and I will see you next time. Bye!